In a world that never stops talking, where noise is mistaken for power and volume is confused with confidence, there is a rare presence that does not compete with chaos. It does not argue, it does not chase attention, it does not prove itself. Yet when it enters the room, everything shifts. Not because it demands to be seen, but because it cannot be ignored. This is silent strength. This is the moment when grace speaks louder than words. You see, true strength does not rush. It does not react to every opinion or every challenge thrown its way. It stands grounded, aware, and deeply rooted within itself. Many people believe that to be strong, you must always respond, always defend, always be heard. But that is not strength. That is fear wearing a mask of control. Real strength is the ability to remain still when everything around you is trying to pull you out of your center. Grace is not weakness. Grace is mastery. It is the discipline to choose your energy carefully. It is the awareness to understand that not every battle deserves your presence. When you are aligned with yourself, when your mind is calm and your heart is clear, silence becomes your statement. People will feel it before you even say a word. Silence reveals inner power in a way that words never can. Most people misunderstand. They think it is empty. They think it is absence. They think it is something to be filled as quickly as possible. But silence is not absence. Silence is presence in its purest form. It is the space where truth begins to speak without distortion. It is the moment where you are no longer performing for the world, but instead returning back to yourself. When a person cannot sit in silence, it often means they are not comfortable with what they might hear within themselves. Because silence does not lie, it does not entertain distraction, it does not offer escape. It reflects you exactly as you are, without filters. And this is where real strength begins. Strength, not in how loudly you can express yourself, but in how calmly you can face yourself without turning away. Inner power is not built in moments of noise and reaction. It is built in stillness. It is built in those quiet moments when you choose not to respond immediately, when you choose not to react emotionally, when you choose to observe instead of rush. In that space, something shifts. You begin to see your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. You begin to notice your emotions instead of being consumed by them. This awareness is the foundation of true strength. Many people believe power is about control over others, but silent strength is control over the self. It is the ability to remain steady when the world tries to disturb you. It is the ability to stay grounded when opinions, judgments, and expectations are pulling you in every direction. And this grounding cannot be achieved through noise. It can only be cultivated through silence. In silence, you start to hear what is real and what is not. You begin to recognize which thoughts are yours and which are simply reactions shaped by fear or past conditioning. Without silence, everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it must be addressed immediately. But with silence, urgency dissolves and clarity begins to emerge. You realize that not everything deserves your energy and not every moment requires your voice. There is a deep strength in someone who does not rush to fill every gap with words. Because that person is not controlled by insecurity. That person is not trying to prove existence through constant expression. Instead, they are rooted in something deeper. They understand that their value is not dependent on being constantly seen or heard. Their value exists even in stillness. Silence also teaches patience, and patience is not passive. It is active awareness. It is the ability to hold space without collapsing into reaction. When you sit in silence, you are training your mind to stop chasing every impulse. You are training your body to relax into the present moment. And over time, this creates a kind of inner stability that cannot be easily shaken by external circumstances. In a noisy world, silence becomes a form of discipline. Not everyone can handle it. Because in silence, there is no distraction to hide behind. There is only you, and that is where transformation begins. When you stop escaping yourself, you start understanding yourself. And understanding is the first step toward mastery. People who develop silent strength are not disconnected from life. they are more connected to it. Because they are not reacting blindly, they are responding consciously. They are not lost in chaos, they are observing it with clarity. And from that clarity, their actions carry weight. Not because they are loud, but because they are intentional. Silence reveals what words often conceal. It shows your fears, your habits, your attachments, and your inner conflicts. But instead of avoiding this, the strong individual learns to sit with it, to witness it without judgment. And in that witnessing, something powerful happens. The need to constantly react begins to fade. And in its place, calm awareness grows. This is why silence is not weakness, it is refinement. It is where inner power is purified, stripped of ego, stripped of noise, stripped of unnecessary struggle. What remains is clarity, what remains is presence, what remains is strength that does not need to announce itself. And in that quiet space, you begin to understand that you were never lacking power. You were simply too loud to hear it. Grace is controlled strength, and this is where most people misunderstand the true essence of power. They associate strength with force, with dominance, with loud expression and visible assertion, but controlled strength moves differently. It does not rush to prove itself, it does not collapse under pressure, it does not lose balance when challenged. Instead, it remains composed, aware, and deliberate. This is what grace truly is. Not softness in the sense of weakness, but refinement in the sense of mastery. When strength is uncontrolled, it becomes reaction, it becomes impulse. It becomes a constant need to defend identity at every moment. But when strength is controlled, it transforms into grace. And grace is not passive, it is deeply active, but in a quiet way. In a quiet way, it is the ability to respond without being consumed by emotion. It is the ability to act without being driven by fear. It is the ability to stand firm without becoming rigid. Controlled strength begins with awareness. Awareness of your emotions, awareness of your thoughts, awareness of your inner state before you respond to the outer world. Most people react first and reflect later. But grace reverses this pattern. It creates a space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to observe, the freedom to act from clarity instead of confusion. There is a quiet dignity in someone who does not need to escalate every situation. When challenged, they do not immediately rise in resistance. They pause, they breathe. They understand that not every moment requires force. Sometimes, the highest form of strength is restraint. Not because you cannot act, but because you choose not to act impulsively. That choice itself is power. Grace is also emotional intelligence in motion. It is understanding that your internal state shapes your external reality. When you are controlled by emotion, you lose direction. But when emotion is observed and guided, it becomes energy instead of chaos. Controlled strength does not suppress emotion. It channels it. It transforms intensity into clarity. It turns reaction into response. Think of a person who never loses composure, even when provoked. Not because they are unaffected, but because they are centered. That center is not built overnight. It is cultivated through discipline, through self-observation, through repeated moments of choosing calm over chaos. But this is how grace is formed. Not through avoidance of difficulty, but through mastery within it. Many people mistake loud confidence for true strength, but loudness is often insecurity, seeking validation. Controlled strength does not need validation. It is self-anchored. It does not depend on external approval to maintain stability. This is why grace feels powerful even in silence, because it is not trying to convince anyone. It simply exists in its own stability. In conflict, grace does not seek destruction. It seeks resolution. Not every disagreement must become a battle. Not every difference must become division. Controlled strength understands this deeply. It knows when to speak and when to remain silent. It knows when to engage and when to step back. This wisdom is what separates reaction from mastery. There is also discipline within grace. Discipline over speech, discipline over reaction, discipline over impulse. Anyone can speak in anger. Anyone can act in frustration. But to remain composed when emotions rise requires inner control, and this control is not suppression. It is awareness guided by intention. Grace also reflects respect for self. When you lose control easily, you are not just reacting to others, you are revealing lack of stability within yourself. But when you remain steady, you are showing that your center is not easily disturbed. That center is your true strength. It is not built by controlling others. It is built by understanding yourself deeply. Controlled strength allows you to move through life without unnecessary resistance. You do not push against every wave. You learn to navigate it. You learn to adjust without losing direction. And in this adaptability, there is elegance. There is flow. There is balance between firmness and flexibility. In a person who embodies grace does not need to dominate a space. Their presence naturally settles it. They do not raise their voice to be heard. They speak with clarity, and their silence carries equal weight. This balance is what makes controlled strength so powerful. It is not one-dimensional. It is not rigid. It is alive, aware, and intentional. Over time, this way of being transforms how others perceive you. Not because you are performing differently, but because you are no longer reacting unconsciously. Your presence becomes steady. Your energy becomes calm. And people begin to feel that stability without needing explanation. Grace is not the absence of strength. It is strength refined to its highest form. Strength that no longer needs to prove itself because it already understands itself. And when strength reaches this level of control, it no longer appears as force. It appears as peace. And in that quiet mastery, controlled strength becomes grace, and grace becomes undeniable power. Presence speaks louder than words, and yet most people underestimate it because they are too focused on expression rather than embodiment. Words can be polished, rehearsed, repeated, and even manipulated, but presence cannot be faked for long. It is what remains when all performance falls away. It is the energy you carry when you enter a space, the silence you bring into a conversation, the stillness that others unconsciously respond to before you even speak. True presence is not about trying to appear powerful. It is what naturally emerges when you are no longer divided within yourself. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, there is no internal conflict. And when there is no internal conflict, your presence becomes steady. It becomes grounded. It becomes something people can feel without needing explanation. This is why some individuals can say very little, yet their impact is deep and lasting. Most people try to build influence through words alone. They believe that speaking more will make them more significant. But presence works differently. It is not built through quantity of speech, but through quality of being. A person who is fully present does not rush their words. They do not speak to fill silence. They speak when it is necessary, and when they do, their words carry weight because they come from clarity, not from noise. Presence is deeply connected to awareness. When you are fully aware of yourself, you are no longer scattered. You are not pulled in multiple directions by external opinions or internal confusion. You are here, fully. And this fullness creates a kind of still energy that others can sense. It is not loud, but it is unmistakable. People may forget what was said in a conversation, but they rarely forget how they felt in your presence. There is also a certain calm authority that comes with presence. Not authority imposed through control, but authority born from stability. When you are present, you are not seeking approval in every moment. You are not trying to adjust yourself constantly to fit expectations. You are simply being, and in that being, there is a quiet confidence that does not need validation. Many people lose presence because they are mentally elsewhere. They are thinking about what to say next, how they are being perceived, or what outcome they want to achieve. But presence exists only in the now. The moment you leave the present moment in your mind, your presence weakens. You are physically there, but energetically absent. And people can feel that absence even if they cannot explain it. A strong presence does not require constant movement or expression. Sometimes it is found in stillness. A person who can sit calmly without discomfort, who can listen without interrupting, who can observe without reacting immediately, naturally develops a deeper presence because they are not trying to prove anything in that moment. They are fully engaged with reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. Presence also changes the way you communicate. When you are present, your words are more intentional. You do not speak just to respond, you speak to contribute. There is clarity in your tone, precision in your expression, and sincerity in your intent. People can sense when someone is truly there with them, not distracted, not half engaged. That full attention itself becomes rare and therefore powerful. In silence, presence becomes even more visible. Because when words are removed, what remains is energy, and energy does not lie. It reveals whether you are grounded or restless, centered or scattered, aware or distracted. This is why some silences feel comfortable and others feel heavy. The difference is presence. A calm presence makes silence peaceful. A disturbed presence makes silence uncomfortable. To cultivate presence, one must return repeatedly to awareness. To notice when the mind drifts. To observe when reaction replaces reflection. To gently bring oneself back to the moment again and again. This practice may seem simple, but over time it reshapes how you exist in the world. You stop living in fragments of attention and start living in wholeness. Presence is also about integrity between inner state and outer expression. When what you feel internally matches how you present yourself externally, there is no distortion. There is no effort to maintain a false image. This alignment creates trust even without words. People trust presence because it feels authentic. It does not try to impress, it simply is. And in a world filled with noise, distraction, and constant expression, presence becomes rare. And what is rare becomes powerful. Not because it demands attention, but because it naturally holds it. You do not chase respect when you have presence. It follows you. You do not force influence. It emerges when presence is strong. Even your silence communicates clarity. Even your stillness communicates confidence. Even your absence is felt, because presence is not dependent on action alone. It is rooted in being, and in that depth of being, presence becomes louder than any word ever spoken. Awareness over reaction is where the shift from unconscious living to intentional living truly begins. Most people move through life reacting to words, reacting to situations, reacting to emotions that rise without warning. It becomes automatic. Something happens and immediately there is a response, no pause, no observation, no understanding, just reaction. And over time, this pattern creates a life that feels out of control because it is driven by external triggers rather than inner clarity. But awareness changes everything. Awareness introduces space. And in that space, there is power. The moment you become aware of what is happening within you, you are no longer completely controlled by it. You can feel anger without becoming it. You can experience fear without acting from it. You can notice the urge to react and still choose a different path. This is where real strength begins to form. Reaction is fast, but it is blind. It does not ask questions. It does not seek understanding. It simply follows impulse. Awareness, on the other hand, is steady. It observes before it acts. It listens before it speaks. It understands before it decides. And because of this, awareness leads to clarity, while reaction often leads to regret. Think about how many moments in life are shaped by immediate reaction. A word spoken in anger, a decision made in frustration, a judgment formed without full understanding. These reactions feel powerful in the moment, but they often leave behind consequences that could have been avoided. Not because the situation was difficult, but because there was no awareness present to guide the response. Awareness does not remove emotion. It refines your relationship with it. Instead of being overwhelmed, you become observant. Instead of being carried away, you remain grounded. You start to notice patterns within yourself. You begin to see what triggers you, what disturbs your peace, what pulls you out of your center. And once you see clearly, you can begin to change. There is a certain discipline required to choose awareness over reaction, because reaction is easy. It feels natural. It requires no effort, but awareness asks you to slow down. It asks you to pause when everything inside you wants to move quickly. It asks you to remain present when your mind is trying to escape. This is not comfortable at first, but it is necessary for growth. When you develop awareness, your responses become intentional. You no longer speak just to release emotion. You speak with purpose. You no longer act just to defend your ego. You act from understanding. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means your actions are guided by clarity rather than confusion. In difficult situations, awareness becomes your anchor. While others may lose control, you remain steady. Not because you are unaffected, but because you are not consumed. You see the situation as it is, not just as it feels in the moment. This ability to stay grounded allows you to respond in a way that is aligned with your values, not just your emotions. Awareness also brings responsibility, because once you see clearly, you can no longer pretend you do not understand. You begin to recognize your role in your reactions. You stop blaming everything outside of you and start looking within. This is not always easy, but it is necessary if you want to grow beyond old patterns. Over time, awareness begins to reshape your entire way of being. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less controlled by external circumstances. Instead, you become more stable, more thoughtful, more intentional. Your energy is no longer scattered across every trigger. It becomes focused, directed, and calm. People often think that reacting quickly shows strength, but true strength is found in restraint, in the ability to pause, to observe, to choose. This does not make you slow, it makes you precise. And precision is far more powerful than speed without direction. When awareness becomes a habit, even challenging situations begin to feel different. You are no longer overwhelmed by them. You see them as opportunities to practice control, to deepen understanding, to strengthen your center. What once disturbed you begins to teach you, and as this awareness grows, your presence becomes more stable. Your silence becomes more meaningful. Your words become more intentional. Because everything you do is no longer driven by reaction, but guided by understanding. This is how inner strength develops. Not through force, not through control of others, but through awareness of self. And when awareness becomes stronger than reaction, your life is no longer shaped by impulse, but by conscious choice. And in that conscious choice, you begin to move with clarity instead of chaos. Restraint is not weakness, even though the world often tries to convince you otherwise. People are taught to associate strength with immediate action, quick responses, and visible assertion. If you do not react, they assume you are unable. If you remain silent, they assume you have nothing to say. If you choose not to engage, they assume you are avoiding. But this is a misunderstanding. Because restraint is not the absence of strength, it is the refinement of it. Anyone can react. Anyone can speak without thinking, act without awareness, and express without control. That requires no discipline. It requires no understanding. It is simply impulse moving without direction. But restraint is different. Restraint requires you to feel everything and still remain steady. It requires you to hold your ground without needing to prove it in every moment. It requires you to have the capacity to act, but the wisdom to choose when not to. There is a deep strength in being able to pause when everything inside you is pushing you to respond. In that pause, you are not suppressing yourself. You are creating space. Space to see clearly, space to understand fully, space to choose wisely. Without that space, your actions are not truly yours. They are reactions shaped by emotion, by habit, by external pressure. Okay? Restraint also reflects self-respect. When you value yourself, you do not give your energy to everything that demands it. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. You understand that your time, your attention, and your energy are limited. And because they are limited, they must be used with intention. This is not weakness. This is clarity. Many situations in life will invite you to lose control. Someone may challenge you, provoke you, misunderstand you. The immediate reaction is to defend, to explain, to fight back. But restraint asks a different question. Is this necessary? Does this deserve your energy? Will this lead to something meaningful, or is it simply a moment of ego-seeking validation? When you begin to ask these questions, your actions become more conscious. Restraint is not about holding everything in. It is not about silence driven by fear. It is about silence driven by understanding. There is a difference. Fearful silence avoids conflict because it feels incapable. Conscious silence avoids unnecessary conflict because it sees no value in it. One comes from weakness, the other comes from strength. To practice restraint is to trust yourself. To trust that you do not need to react immediately to be understood. To trust that your worth is not dependent on constant expression. To trust that your presence alone carries enough weight. This kind of trust does not come from external validation. It comes from inner stability. There is also a sense of freedom in restraint. When you are not reacting to everything, you are no longer controlled by everything. You are not pulled into every argument, not affected by every opinion, not disturbed by every situation. You begin to move through life with more ease because you are no longer entangled in unnecessary struggle. Restraint sharpens your perception. When you are not rushing to respond, you are able to observe more. You see details others miss. You understand dynamics others overlook. You begin to recognize patterns both in yourself and in the world around you. This deeper understanding allows you to act with precision when it truly matters. And when you do choose to act, your action carries more weight because it is not constant. It is not scattered. It is focused and intentional. People notice this. They begin to understand that when you speak, it has meaning. When you move, it has purpose. This is the quiet authority that comes from restraint. It is important to understand that restraint does not mean inaction forever. It means timing your action correctly. It means waiting until your response is aligned with clarity rather than emotion. Sometimes action is necessary. Sometimes speaking is required. But when it comes from a place of control, it is effective. When it comes from reaction, it is often wasted. Restraint also builds inner strength over time. Each moment you choose awareness over impulse, you strengthen your ability to remain steady. Each moment you resist the urge to react unnecessarily, you deepen your control over yourself. This is how discipline is formed, not in grand actions, but in small, consistent choices. In a world that encourages constant reaction, restraint becomes rare, and what is rare becomes powerful. Not because it is trying to stand out, but because it naturally does. It creates space where others create noise. It brings calm where others bring chaos. And when you begin to live with this understanding, you realize something important. You are not here to respond to everything. You are here to move with intention. And in that intention, restraint reveals itself as one of the highest forms of strength. true confidence is calm, and this is where many people lose their direction. They mistake intensity for confidence. They believe that being loud, dominant, or constantly expressive is a sign of inner strength. But what often appears as confidence is simply noise covering uncertainty. Because when confidence is real, it does not need to be displayed in exaggerated ways. It becomes steady, quiet, and deeply rooted. Calm confidence does not rush to prove anything. It does not seek approval in every moment. It does not depend on how others respond. It is self-anchored. This means your sense of worth is not shaken by opinions, praise, or criticism. You are aware of who you are, and that awareness remains stable even when the external world shifts. This stability is what makes calm confidence so powerful. When confidence is calm, your actions become measured. You do not speak just to be heard. You speak because there is something meaningful to say. You do not act just to be seen. You act because it aligns with your intention. There is no unnecessary movement, no wasted energy. Everything becomes more precise, more focused, more aligned with your inner clarity. Most people struggle with calmness because their confidence is not yet grounded. It depends on outcomes, on validation, on comparison. When things go well, they feel strong. When things do not, they feel uncertain. This constant fluctuation creates instability. But calm confidence does not rise and fall with circumstances. It remains consistent because it is built from within. To develop this kind of confidence, one must become comfortable with stillness, because calmness is not just an external appearance. It is an internal state. It is the absence of unnecessary tension, the absence of constant doubt, the absence of the need to perform. And this can only be achieved when you stop seeking yourself in the eyes of others and start recognizing yourself from within. Calm confidence also changes how you handle challenges. Instead of reacting with panic or defensiveness, you remain composed. You assess the situation clearly, you respond with intention. This does not mean you ignore difficulty. It means you do not let difficulty disturb your center. You face it with steadiness rather than urgency. There is also a quiet trust that comes with calm confidence. Trust in your ability to handle situations, trust in your decisions, trust in your path. This trust removes the need to constantly second-guess yourself. It allows you to move forward without hesitation, not because you are certain of every outcome, but because you are certain of your ability to adapt. People often feel drawn to calm confidence because it creates a sense of safety. It does not impose pressure. It does not create tension. It brings ease into interactions. When someone is calm and confident, others do not feel the need to compete or defend. They feel understood. They feel respected. They feel at ease. This is a different kind of influence, one that is not forced but naturally received. Calm confidence is also closely connected to acceptance. Acceptance of yourself as you are, including your strengths and your limitations. When you accept yourself fully, you no longer feel the need to hide, exaggerate, or pretend. You become authentic. And authenticity is the foundation of true confidence. It is important to understand that calm does not mean passive. Calm does not mean lacking energy or drive. It means your energy is controlled, not scattered. It means your focus is clear, not divided. You can still act with strength, still pursue your goals, still stand firm when needed. But all of this happens without losing your inner balance. In moments of pressure, calm confidence becomes even more visible. While others may become overwhelmed, you remain steady. Not because you are unaffected, but because you are grounded. You understand that panic does not solve anything. You understand that clarity comes from stillness, not from chaos. And so you no longer have to force it. It becomes part of how you think, how you feel, how you act. Your presence becomes more stable. Your communication becomes more effective. Your decisions become more intentional. This is why true confidence does not need to announce itself. It is felt without words. It is recognized without explanation. It does not demand attention, yet it naturally holds it. And when confidence becomes calm, it no longer depends on the world to confirm it, because it already knows itself. Mastery begins within, and this is the point where everything comes together. Without inner mastery, every other form of strength remains unstable. You may appear strong for a moment, you may control situations temporarily, you may influence others briefly, but without control over yourself, it will not last. Because the real challenge is not outside of you, it is within you. It is your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, your habits. And until you understand these, you will always be responding to life rather than shaping it. And can't. Most people spend their time trying to control the external world. They try to manage outcomes, influence opinions, and avoid discomfort. But they overlook the one place where true control is possible, within. Because you cannot always control what happens around you, but you can learn to control how you meet it. And this is where mastery begins. Inner mastery is not about perfection. It is about awareness and discipline. It is about seeing yourself clearly without distortion, understanding your patterns, recognizing your weaknesses, and not turning away from them. Many people avoid looking within because it is uncomfortable. It reveals things they do not want to face. But avoiding this does not remove it. It only strengthens its control over you. And when you begin to look within with honesty, you start to see how much of your life is driven by unconscious patterns. Reactions that feel automatic, emotions that rise without understanding, decisions that repeat the same outcomes. This is not weakness. This is lack of awareness. And once you become aware, you begin to have a choice. Mastery requires discipline. Not discipline imposed from outside, but discipline chosen from within. The discipline to pause when you want to react. The discipline to stay consistent when you want to give up. The discipline to remain focused when distractions appear. This kind of discipline builds slowly, through repeated actions, through daily effort, through small moments where you choose awareness over impulse. Inner mastery also requires patience, because change does not happen instantly. You do not transform your habits overnight. You do not gain control over your thoughts in a single moment. It is a process, and in that process, there will be setbacks, moments where you fall back into old patterns, moments where you lose awareness. But these moments are not failure. They are part of the path. Each time you notice, each time you return to awareness, you strengthen your ability to remain centered. There is also a sense of responsibility that comes with inner mastery, because once you understand yourself, you can no longer blame everything outside of you. You begin to see your role in your experiences, not in a way that creates guilt, but in a way that creates clarity. You understand that your reactions shape your reality, your choices create your direction. And with that understanding, you begin to act more intentionally. Inner mastery changes how you experience life. Situations that once disturbed you begin to lose their power. Not because they disappear, but because your relationship with them changes. You no longer react in the same way. You observe more, understand more, and respond with greater clarity. This shift creates stability. A stability that is not dependent on external conditions. It also deepens your presence. When you are not distracted by internal conflict, you become more focused, more aware, more grounded. Your energy is no longer divided between what you feel and what you try to show. It becomes unified. And in that unity there is strength. Mastery within also brings freedom. Freedom from constant reaction. Freedom from unnecessary struggle. Freedom from being controlled by every external influence. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means you become capable of handling difficulty without losing yourself, capable of facing challenges without collapsing under them. As this mastery grows, your actions become more aligned. You no longer act from confusion, you act from understanding. You no longer move without direction, you move with intention. This alignment creates a sense of clarity that others can feel. Not because you are trying to show it, but because it is real. True mastery is not loud. It does not need recognition. It does not seek to impress. It is quiet, consistent, and deeply rooted.